Hey, this is Bunny, and today we're going to talk about paintbrushes for painting your minis. You are going to need some brushes before you can paint your miniatures. So let's talk about what you need, what you should have, and how many of them you should have. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need your standard miniature paintbrushes. Now you want brushes that are round, so you want a round brush. So you look at that tip, that's a round brush tip. You want round brushes with a full belly, so that are kind of fat in the belly. I'll use a larger brush to show you. So they kind of have a fat belly there, and they taper to a nice fine point. Okay, so you want a full belly with a nice fine point. You do want multiple sizes of this type of brush. Okay, these are your standard miniature painting brushes. Ignore this one. He was full-bellied, and he did have a nice point, but I've wrecked him. We'll talk about wrecking brushes in a minute. So you do want a selection of sizes. I have everything from this big guy's a size 5, and this is a 4, 3, 2. This is a size 1. This is a 00, also a little bit wrecked. You can tell the bristles are starting to pull apart. And this one is a size 000. So you want a selection of sizes. The one you'll probably use the most is like a size 1 or maybe a size 2. That'll cover most of your miniatures the quickest, because generally we're talking smaller miniatures, not big things like a Tarrasque. But you do want even the larger brushes, because you are going to have some miniatures that are either pretty big, so you're going to want to cover areas quickly, or they're predominantly one color. So if you're painting a tree and you just want to paint the trunk, you might use a larger brush just to cover that area faster. But you definitely want primarily to use a size 1 or a size 2, probably both. I do like having as much as a size 8 for my larger brushes. So your detailed brushes are your 0s, your 00s, or even your 000s. Now I prefer a 000. It allows me to get eyeballs really nice, because I can get right in there and just touch a very little bit of my surface. So I do like a 000. That is my preference, but a lot of people are totally fine with a 0 or a 00. Depends how detailed you like to get. So I buy my 000s in quite large packs. Okay, these are the 000 brushes I use, because I go through them. I wreck my brushes frequently. So this is what I use. Yes, I will put a link because someone's, oops, I'm dropping things. Yes, I will put a link because someone is going to ask. I will put a link to this particular package. This is a set of 5 000s. That's what I primarily use. That is these brass handled ones, and I've got like 3 boxes at a time because I go through them. But you might be fine with a slightly larger brush size. So I will also put a link to a standard set of these black handled brushes that I use, just so that you have that link. You can of course use any brushes you like, but you do want a full belly and a nice fine tip. You also want some flat or domed brushes. So this is a domed brush, so it's round but doesn't have a point. Okay, so it has this big domey tip to it. And then I have my flat brushes. These are great for dry brushing if you dry brush. If you don't dry brush, then you probably don't need these. If all you do is apply washes, or if you prefer airbrushing, then that's fine. You probably won't need a lot of flat brushes. Though a good flat brush, now you'll notice mine are all pretty wrecked because I do a lot of dry brushing. But a good flat brush can be good for covering large areas. So you might want to get yourself some nice flat brushes just for that. But for that, I would just use a larger size full belly brush. So you want a selection of cheap brushes, okay? There are going to be times where you know you're going to wreck your brush because of a technique you're using. You want either a bunch of brushes you don't care if you wreck, or a bunch of brushes that are already kind of trashed. Like this one's pretty trashed. I can't really do anything worse to it. This one here is pretty much unusable as a round brush, but now it's been kind of demoted into the round brush area. I only put it in this pile just so you can see the different sizing. So it's good to keep a wrecked brush. Like this one's really wrecked. Okay, this one is not good at all. But it is good for dry brushing or applying washes because it still absorbs paint really well. So I keep it for that. So you want a selection of brushes that you are okay with wrecking or that are already wrecked. So just because a brush gets demoted out of this group, like this one's demoted now, but just because a brush gets demoted out of this group doesn't mean it's useless. It just means it now serves a different purpose. Once this group is trashed, they are garbage. Okay, there's only so many times you can reuse a brush. The round belly brushes, the way they work is they have this big belly that holds the paint, and the paint then trickles out of the tip. Okay? The tip allows for precise control over where you apply your paint. So when you're using one of these brushes, you don't typically sit there and paint like this. You typically, let me just fix that point. You typically apply the paint to the brush, and then you just use the point to apply the paint. Okay, so you typically would paint like that, not like this, because that's a quick way to ruin your brush. Though you will see me frequently painting like this. And yes, it ruins brushes, but that's why I buy cheaper synthetic brushes and not good quality sable hair brushes. The smaller the brush, so if you compare the sizes here, this is a fairly large brush and this one's real tiny. So I love these tiny brushes for detail work, but the smaller the brush, the faster the paint dries on the brush. So if you're painting an entire miniature like with this guy, so you want to paint the entire thing, this is going to, one, take you longer, but it's also going to wreck your brush faster because as the paint is in this tiny little belly, so it doesn't hold much paint, it's going to be actively drying the entire time. So use the right size brush for your application. Because in theory, you could paint an entire miniature with this particular size, but look how teeny weeny he is. The paint's going to dry and that brush is going to end up wrecked way before it should. So use the right size brush for your project. Because the smaller the brush, the faster the paint will dry on those bristles. So let's talk about real sable hair brushes, fantastic brushes, versus these kind of cheap synthetic brushes. Which one you use is a matter of personal preference. I do have a couple of sable hair brushes that are really expensive and really good. I pretty much use sable hair only when I'm painting something special that I want to use a really good quality brush on. Because sable hair brushes are really expensive. They do last longer if you take care of them. They are easy to wreck. So with these brushes, it's not too difficult to try to get these back into a point by wetting them down and kind of doing this twisty thing. You can get a synthetic back to a good point pretty well. It's not as easy to get a sable hair or a natural hair brush back into a good point. Okay, once you wreck it, it's kind of wrecked. And that's just the way it is. But they are fantastic for applying paint. You don't have a lot of bristle strokes. I do recommend a couple of good sable hair brushes. Go to your local craft store or your local hobby store to find really good ones. Sometimes getting sable hair brushes online can be a little dicey. So visit your local hobby shop for that. Synthetics are cheaper. So these are way cheaper. Like these are pretty cheap brushes. So I prefer these really cheap brushes mostly because it's not difficult at all for me to take this brush and destroy it and then just replace it. So I get these, like I said, I get these big packs of these little brushes and I get those for a reason. It's because I wreck my brushes all the time. Okay? I am hard on my brushes. I will be honest about that. I'm gonna do some videos where I talk about how to use your paintbrush, and you'll notice I violate most of those rules. So one of the common rules I violate, and that's why this one is split, is you're supposed to always pull paint towards you. Okay? You're not ever supposed to push paint with your brush. What do? A lot of pushing. And you're not supposed to do that because it wrecks your brushes really fast. So I use synthetic because I use a lot of techniques that are not great for preserving your brushes. So if you're really good at looking after your brushes, really good at maintaining them and making sure they're well rinsed and making sure they're stored properly, and stored properly, by the way, is point down, especially when they're drying, You should hang them. You can get paintbrush hangers. That is the proper way to store a brush. I often don't do that. I tend to leave them in a big pile. So for me, an expensive sable hair brush does tend to get wrecked and is kind of a waste. But if you are a more conscientious painter than I am, then you might want a few sable hair brushes. But I get excellent results just using synthetics, and I can go through them like there's no tomorrow because I'm really bad at painting properly. I do a lot of different techniques that involve a lot of pushing of the paint, and that does wreck the belly of your brush. And once the belly of your brush is wrecked, there goes the point. So, yeah. So I use synthetics. It's also really good to have a whole bunch of synthetics around because if you have any kind of metallic paint, so for example, that's not a metallic paint. For example, I have these fairly cheap silver and gold paints that I use a lot of. I use them to make washes, but metallic paints destroy your brushes. Okay, the stuff that makes them metallic, that makes them all glittery and pretty, that stuff is also the stuff that clings to the inside, so it'll get right up in the belly of that brush and it'll build up and destroy your brushes. So if you are using a specialty paint like a metallic, there's a couple other things that do it as well. But any paint that isn't just straight acrylic paint, that has something in it to make it super glossy or super shiny or super metallic, super glittery, so those glitter paints, anything you're using that is not strictly acrylic paint, it's going to destroy your brush. So make sure you have cheap disposable brushes that you don't mind having to chuck when you're done, because those specialty paints, those metallics, those glimmers, all of those paints will destroy your brushes. So have synthetics on hand, even if you love to use a good quality real hair brush like a sable hair. If you are going to do real hair brushes, go with a sable hair. They are the best of the hair brushes. If you're going to invest the money, you might as well invest it well. So that is all I wanted to discuss today. I just wanted to talk about brushes. I will provide a link to these little tiny detail brushes that I use, and this it'll be a more complete set. You'll notice I've wrecked a few, and I in fact just moved this one over here because it's kind of wrecked. So I will also provide a link to this basic starter set of brushes. Now over time you're going to find that you prefer certain sizes and you have a certain technique, so you might go away from buying a set and just buy specific brushes that you'll use, which is what I do these days, because I go through this a lot faster than I'll go through this guy. So I will provide links to those, and over time you should curate and develop your own selection of brushes based on how you paint and what size you like to work with. So that's about it for today. I hope you'll be back with us next time. Bye!